and welcome to another edition of Tribulation Ready Survival. I'm Michael, and today we're going to do one of my favorite things, be in the garden. But today's topic is going to be compost. Now, you can see behind me I've got three different bins. One is usually empty, another one is the bin that's being worked on, and the third bin is the one that's finished. So today we're going to focus on the finished compost because what I'm going to be doing is showing you how I sift through it and then I add it into my gardens. But let's talk about what goes into the compost. For me, in the fall, I start gathering all of the leaves. My neighbor's leaves out in a large area over here where there's a bunch of cottonwood trees, giant piles of leaves pile up, and I bring them here and I stuff all three of these bins completely full. And then on top of that, you get leaf mold from the leaves, and that is such a great addition to the gardens. It makes everything flourish. It's great. So, leaves. I don't add yard scraps. I don't put grass or any of that stuff into my compost. I also don't put in anything with seeds. So if I put in peppers, I make sure there's no seeds in there. If I put in any kitchen scraps, I take the seeds out as best that I can. I don't put in strawberries, I don't put in mulberries or raspberries or any of those things that you can't get the seeds out of. I don't do that because I don't want to have volunteers in my garden and have to pick them out. It just makes it easier for me. Another thing that I do I also put coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. I put all my coffee, the empty coffee filters, old coffee filters work great in here. Old coffee, the liquid coffee that doesn't get drank, we pour that in there. It works great. So coffee in any fashion or form is great in a compost. I also, if you know me well enough from my videos, you've seen that I like to fish. So when I bring home some fish and I get them cleaned up and filleted and get the meat off, the carcasses go in here too, because fish make great fertilizer. You can go to the store and buy fish fertilizer. No, I don't do that. I get my own when I'm done with the fish. So another thing that I put in my compost that some people do not is when it rains, I check the gutters out here and I get free helpers, which are worms that wash into the drain. I put them in my gardens and my compost. And sorry about the siren, somebody somewhere needs help. But I put lots of worms in here. And we may run into some today, and what I'll do is I'll just recycle them. They come out of the finished compost and they go into the new compost. So those are basically the things that I add into my compost. And the last thing that I add into my compost is scraps out of the garden themselves. So all my leaves that are on my bean plants, leaves off of my tomato plants, tops of my carrots that I'm not using, any of those things that I'm not using go back right in here. As long as they don't have seeds, they're going back in. Now, the one thing you really should be careful about is the tomato stems. Stems do not break down very well in a compost. They just take forever. So what I do with those is I take them when I'm done with all my tomato plants and I burn them, and I take the ash and the ash goes in here. That breaks them down really fast instead of waiting literally 6-8 months for a bunch of tomato stems to break down. So that's basically the overall of how or what I put in my compost. Let's get in to show you how I sift the compost, and then I will show you the second method that I do with my compost that some people find controversial. So we're going to get into the compost bin here. We're going to get into this one. This is the old compost. It means that we don't add to it. This one is the new stuff, and we will add to it until this stuff is gone. So some of the tools that I use, especially in a small garden like this, is I have a sifting tray. This works for putting, sifting dirt and getting rocks out and limbs out or wood and all kinds of stuff. But this also works great as a compost sifter. This is hardware cloth or rabbit cage or whatever you want to call it. Super cheap at the hardware store. That's where I got my hardware cloth. And then I fastened it to the bottom here, nice and sturdy with a bunch of screws and whatever, and it's very sturdy. And it's going to be important because that's about the size I want my compost granules to be, or smaller. And so what I will be doing is I will be scooping my finished compost out of here. I will be out of here scooping it into here. I'm going to align this over the top of my wheelbarrow, and then I will mash it and run it across until it has gone through as much as possibly can, and whatever is too big goes back in the compost bin. In this particular case, I'm starting this new one here. I'm going to take all of the old compost and I'm going to combine it so we can have some of that same organisms, some of the good organisms that are thriving in this one, going into this one. So let's get into the sifting process. All right, let's get everything ready. All right, so now that I have my wheelbarrow, let's take my sifting tray, put it right there on the top. So now that I have my tray, I'm going to fill this with compost and then I'm going to run it across. So let's get a little bit closer look how I do that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get in here to my compost bin. And by the way, compost, when it's done, does not stink. It doesn't stink. So for me, since I've used mostly leaves, compost leaves and kitchen scraps, to me it has a pine smell. Now there's still some leaves in here and those things are fine. They're going to go back. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this on here and I'm just going to run it back and forth. I'm going to run it back and forth. And this takes a little while, but it's oddly satisfying, believe it or not. And you can find imperfections in there, like I'm not sure why that got in there. And once I run it through, basically, I don't know what you want to call it, sift it through my screen here, screen it out, whatever you want to call it. You push down with just some firm. You don't want to clog up all the, you get banana, people put bananas in there with the stickers on it, so you can still sift through those things. You also get, like I said, there's helpers in here. Got some worms right here. And this guy goes back into the new compost. We'll put him in there because he needs a new home. And we will sift through this back and forth until I'm satisfied I got everything out of this. And it helps you pull big sticks out, because I don't discriminate when it comes to sticks. They'll sift out, no big deal. Throw that in there, not a big deal. And so I'm not going to make you sit through 45 minutes to an hour of compost sifting, but it is oddly satisfying, believe it or not. Maybe it is to watch it too, but to stick your hands into this, and I use gloves because this stuff, this wire mesh, sometimes there's, rogue wires or sliver or something. You don't want to cut your finger on it, so I use gloves when I'm doing it. No big deal. And it smells good. It doesn't smell like rotting anything. It has a pine smell to it, mainly because of the cottonwood leaves. But I'm going to run it until it gets to about like this. because this isn't going to go through. But I'll take this all out and I will put it in my all new compost that's just been started. Putting the organisms and everything that are in here in the new one and getting it ready to go. Then you will see, here in a second, I'm going to tap this out. Trying to save as much of this as we can. What I'm left with is beautiful, nice, soft, loamy compost. Okay, so the second method of composting I do is compost tea. So here I have some water that came out of my rain barrel, and I have here a cheap $1 store trash can, and it works great as a little sieve, like a giant tea bag, if you will. And I have placed compost in here. You don't pack it, don't smash it in, and you make a giant tea bag out of this. So the bucket is full now of water, and then I will just set this in here and let it drop. Some of it will come out, it's not too bad, but it'll get heavy enough that it soaks right back down into the bucket. I will let this sit in a sunny spot over here for 2 to 3 days. And it will start to get a little bit of a smell to it. Even though the compost is finished, it'll get a little bit of a smell to it. Kind of funky, but not too bad. And at the end of that 3 days, 2 to 3 days, I will pull this back out, let it drain, and then pour this into my gardens directly, which will get a lot of the nourishment, the minerals and everything, the goodness that's in here, will get it directly into the soil. The one thing that compost tea does not provide that regular compost does is that once you get compost directly onto the soil, it helps to protect the soil from the rays of the sun getting bleached and that type of thing. It helps to protect the soil. Compost tea does not. However, when I put my dry compost on, I water it in, and that kind of helps too. But I have found that using compost tea, actually, if your plants are really hurting or they're just kind of fighting off something, if you put compost tea in the water or in the soil, it will get them to perk back up, kind of like Epsom salt does. Compost tea, that's a great idea. Okay, so those are the two methods that I use for composting here in my gardens, and I'm constantly learning and trying some new things, and I just enjoy spending time out here and watching God's blessings happen in real time. And God is great, and this is something that He continues to bless us with, and I hope that the information in this video and the beautiful pictures inspire you to get out there and start a survival garden, as well as get some compost going. Get some compost going, and if you've got a new method or something maybe that I didn't cover here, or a question, or maybe you think I did something wrong here, that's fine too. Let's discuss that. Put a comment down here, or hit me up on the Facebook page at Tribulation Ready Survival for the link to this video, and let's discuss this. Because in this day and age where everything's expensive and you go to the grocery store and you pay a whole bunch of money for who knows what's in it, why? If you can do this with a little bit of work and a lot of love. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video. So let's do a little pan around the garden here. Of course, we got lots of carrots and tomatoes. We've got clover on the far back side over there, way back over there. Sunflowers coming up. More carrots. Some calendula in the back right about there. This is chicory. And if you look real close at it, the wind's kind of whipped it around, but it's pretty virulent. It's doing pretty good. Chicory will roast the roots and make coffee out of it. It works great. And then, of course, more tomatoes. These are green beans and yellow beans here. More carrots. I really went crazy on the carrots this year. And these are some green onions that I saved last year. So I saved these green onions last year. I let them grow. I let them seed. They're organic. And they all bunched together. So I had to pull the roots, chop the top off. I immediately, within an hour, replanted these onions back into a different bed and spread them out. And of course, when I planted them, I put a little bit of Epsom salt in there, and that helps to prevent the root shock. And guess what? Here they are again. More onions. They just keep coming, and that's what we want. Little sweet pea over here. We had more. The wind just whipped those right out of there. And here we got some tomatoes that I got to transplant as soon as the beans are done. And so then we have chive all the way back there. Chives, they've already been cut down to the ground once. They're coming back again and seeding again. So must be doing something right. And everything gets compost. Everything gets compost.